Welcome to Career Tools. This week, interviews are not a two-way street, despite what you want them to be. Here we go. Folks, we're constantly getting questions about resumes. It is now September of 2014. The market is warming up. Google searches for careers are up 30 to 40% in just the last few weeks, and your resume needs to be squared away. We highly recommend you get a copy of our resume workbook, which takes you through everything you need to do in your resume in incredibly detailed fashion. Check it out. Okay, so Wendy, you and I read a lot of career advice. I actually enjoy reading it. I really do, even when I disagree. I don't enjoy reading management advice that I disagree with, because I think I just think there's a bigger risk. But a lot of career advice, I enjoy reading. It's often wrong. And one thing that's often wrong is this thing that, hey, interviews are a two-way street. You're interviewing the company as much as they're interviewing you.
Yeah.
And no. Yeah, exactly. One of my favorite phrases, yeah, no. Now, there is a kernel of truth in it, but it confuses because it's not specific and because it panders to a person who wants to know about the company, who wants to assert themselves, who doesn't want to be on the defensive, doesn't want to be not in charge. It panders to that thought, but in fact, it's misleading guidance, okay? And it causes people to behave in unacceptable ways. So tell us what guidance we have on interviews not being a two-way street. I just think it's a funny title. Yeah, not a two-way street. I would love for someone that I interviewed to think it's a two-way street. I mean, I really would.
Yeah, I've done that. And I kept my smile and I answered the questions. And then I said no, you're not coming here. Yeah. So the first thing is don't interview the interviewer. The second thing is assess the company, which is what you want to do, and get an offer first.
Yeah, that's the whole key. I'm going to say this again at the end of the cast if I remember to do it. But folks, there are two parts to interviews: getting offers and taking offers. When you're trying to get an offer, it doesn't do you any good to know all kinds of things about the company. First of all, you're not going to be smart enough to adjust on the knowledge. And if you don't get an offer, you won't have the opportunity to take that offer. So we don't want to interview the interviewer. Tell us more.
So that's what the impression that a lot of these articles give, is that you are interviewing the interviewer to see if you want to work there as much as they're interviewing you to see if they want you to work there. And that's not the case. In an interview, you can ask questions and you should ask questions at the end. That's one of the things that we tell you, but it's not an equal conversation. It's not, you don't get as many questions as they do. You don't get to ask anything you want in the same way that they don't get to ask anything they want either. Most people won't ask you blatantly, did you steal money from your last company? Because it's just not a good interview question, right? So the conversation is already restricted. It's just that you get even less than they do. And the things that a lot of people want to ask are things that are kind of, I want to say the word rude. They're not rude, I guess, but, they're things that are about things that are really important to you.
Right.
And right now, the interviewer doesn't care about what's important to you. They only care about what's important to the company, which is, can you do this job?
Yeah, I've often quoted Shel Silverstein's poem called God's Wheel. It shows a kid who comes across God who, in the cartoon that Shel Silverstein draws associated with the poem, there's a picture of a white bearded guy on the top of the earth, basically with the steering wheel stuck into the North Pole. And the kid says, "What's that?" And God says, "That's the wheel I steer the world with. Do you want to give it a try?" And the kid says, "Sure. Where do I sit? How much do I get? When's lunch? When can I quit?" God says, "Give me back my wheel. You're not ready yet." Meaning, you start asking about what's in it for you, a la the Field of Dreams, and you discover that that's not the purpose of the interview, certainly not the purpose of life either. Now look, guys, there's nothing wrong with recognizing you need to know a lot about the company. We respect that. We want you to. We want you to make a good decision. We don't want there to be a Romeo and Juliet where the company likes you and you like them, but you don't get there. That's a terrible outcome. We want a good hire for the right reasons. But there's a time for questions. And that's why we're going to talk about getting an offer first. But a lot of us ask questions. I'm sorry. I'm going to change that just because I've been interviewed a few times. A lot of you, I don't do this. A lot of you think you get to interview the interview, you get to ask questions. For example, could you ask an interview about quality of life or morale at a company? You could. But look, no interviewer is going to tell you it's a terrible place to work. And it's a yes or no question, or a question that doesn't deliver you any information will be terribly helpful. But think about it from a time perspective, folks, because most people dread interviews, but they realize, wow, that went fast. You have wasted a question. Okay. Any question, by the way, about the company in its entirety is by definition wasted. Okay. But in addition, you've asked a question that didn't help you. The purpose of this question was to help you make a decision. But more importantly, even if the question had taught you something useful, you are now taking time out of the portion of the interview that's designed for the recruiter to learn about your strengths in order to determine whether or not to hire you, and talked about the company. If it takes you a minute or a minute and a half, or it's an open-ended question like, tell me your feelings about the morale, and they take 3 or 4 minutes, that's 3 or 4 minutes. And if you're lucky, it's an hour interview, but many of them are 30 or 45 minutes. You've taken 3 or 4 minutes. You know, what is that? It's 5% of the interview. You don't get to talk about what you're good at. You don't get to ask a different question that shows you're knowledgeable. You may not get to close at the end of the interview. And you've probably hit a raw nerve with the interviewer in the sense that interviewers don't want questions like that. Now, let me make an aside here. There are some interviewers who'll tell you, no, those are fine. Those questions are fine. Folks, they're telling you that because they've already ruled you out.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, I'd tell you that was fine in the interview. I wouldn't hire you.
Sure. If I'm 15 minutes in the interview and I've decided I'm not going to hire you, no, let's not put that in my context. The vast majority of interviewers, and by the way, there are professional interviewers, and there are HR people, and there are hiring managers, and then there are potential peers of yours. 80% of them are not prepared. They might make a snap judgment in 15 minutes. If you then spend the rest of the time asking them questions that are interesting conversationally and makes it feel like a conversation, they're going to think they gave you a good interview, when in fact what you don't know is they already said no to you. The chance that your questions are going to make an appreciable difference in their opinion of you is probably 5%. Now, that's 5% we want to do well at. But when a recruiter says, no, that question's completely fine, they're not being truthful with you about what the question said about you to them. They're just being truthful that, yeah, any question is okay because I want you to feel like you can ask me anything. What they're not telling you is, that question is fine, but I dinged you for it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you don't get to ask in the interview, how am I doing?
That's something that people get advice about, and I hate it.
Let me change that and say, you're welcome to ask that, but you're going to get the same answer you get anytime you ask somebody, how's Project X? The person's going to say, fine. It's inappropriate to ask, and nobody is required to give you an honest, helpful answer to a question that's inappropriate. You know, the guidance I give is you're only required to give an honest answer to questions to which you're required to give an answer. If somebody asks you a question that's outside of the realm of what the contextual appropriateness of the interview, you don't have to answer truthfully. Hey, are you going to give me an offer? Well, we'll see. Or it's looking good. In both cases, they could say that in the event they were going to say no to you. And people walk out saying, oh, I'm certain I got an offer, because he says, well, it's looking good. Yeah, I don't think so. So, sorry, a little bit of a rant there, Wendy.
That's okay. I'm not going to guarantee that I'm not going to go off on one later either.
Yeah.
The other thing about those questions is no one is going to tell you the truth. So you shouldn't even be asking. You're wasting your time and you're not getting the truth. And asking your network who will tell you the truth is much better. Don't interview the interviewer, interview your network about those things.
Yeah. I mean, could you ask about your manager's management style? You could. you're not going to get a truthful answer. First of all, nobody knows anybody else's managerial style other than an interviewer would say about someone else, oh, he's well liked, he's a good guy, he's successful, he wouldn't be a manager if he wasn't, kind of thing. And if you ask the manager, him or herself, most people don't have a clear idea of what their management style is. We think they ought to, but they don't. And so they'll probably say something like, well, I like to achieve results, try to have good relationships with my people, pretty much leave them alone, let them, trust them, show them that, I'll let them do what they want to do. And you might think that sounds good until you discover that everybody is saying to you once you get hired, I don't hear anything from this guy. I don't have any guidance. I can't get a decision, right? But is somebody going to tell you that? No, they're not.
No.
Yeah.
No.
So when it comes to interviewing the interviewer, the answer is no. Do you get to ask questions? Yes. At the end of the interview. And those questions we recommend in our interviewing series of podcasts, which is available on the website. We say, ask about the job, ask about your contribution to the role, ask about how you're going to be delivering on the role that you're going to be in. You're interviewing for a job. Only then, when you tell them by your questions that you're smart and so on, do they probably have enough information to make a decision. Once they make the decision and give you an offer, gosh, then, as we'll talk about later, you can ask. So the next thing you mentioned was assess the company.
Yeah. So instead of interrogating the interviewer about the company, we're going to assess the company from the outside, as it were. So there's two ways to do this. First, you can do a bunch of research. And thank God we have the internet. So if I'd have lived in any other age, I would have gone mental. You could type in the name of the company. I did this morning, and morale or benefits or employee reviews, all of them came up with something for the couple of companies that I chose. You can add in the location, and on Google, if you go to more, you can restrict the time. So you can say only things from the last year, so you get recent things. And I did that for one of our clients, for Daimler Trucks, and I didn't find anything about their policy for disabilities, which might be something that you're interested in. But I did find out that one of the locations that we go to for training is hiring a disability consultant. And if I was concerned about that, that would be my answer. They obviously take it seriously.
Yeah.
So you can find out an awful lot without asking the interviewer and giving away those things that are maybe on the side of things that you wouldn't normally want to give away, or things that you just don't want to ask about or shouldn't be asking about because, they hit those raw nerves.
Yeah, I think that, again, the point we're going to make next about getting an offer first, you can assess the company in ways other than interviewing the interviewer. And again, assessing the company is irrelevant to whether or not they offer you. The first part of interviewing is them evaluating you. Play that game. Play that game perfectly. I've often said that interviewing is an artificial reality designed to keep people out. Purpose of interviews is to say no. The best example I have of what interviews are like is, imagine you're a software developer and your company is not growing and there are no promotions, but you see another company growing down the road and you think, I know a lot of people over there, it's a good culture. I want to be a senior software developer and I want a chance to become a software development manager. And I feel like that company, because a rising tide lifts all boats, is going to be a better opportunity for me. So you decide you're going to leave and you're going to go over there. Fine. When you do that, when you make that decision, you go over and you interview as best you can. Okay. And you tell them everything you possibly can about why you're good for the role. And then they don't give you an offer. Well, okay. What good does it do to know about the company? Not a lot. And again, time wasted. On the other hand, if you get an offer, the moment you get an offer, right? The moment you've taken every moment you possibly can to tell them how good you are, within reason, you are not talking about bragging or being arrogant, then you get to decide. Then you get time to decide. You already have a job and you can sit back and go, okay, now let me compare apples to apples. You can't take an offer you don't get. And as hard as interviews are, it makes no sense to be wasting time in the interview. It just doesn't.
No, you've only got an hour.
Yeah, and can you really be good enough to say, "Oh, I don't need an hour to